Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Delighted to be here.
Big picture question, Steve. Where's the leadership factories of the world? Where have they gone to?
It's a great question. I was extraordinarily fortunate to grow up inside GE, and the investment they made in me and hundreds, thousands of other leaders in the business was really quite extraordinary.
Yep.
You went through a series of people and leadership development courses over the years, and then when we had been to the highest or the most senior leadership course, you then would go on a retreat. So I spent 5 days with General Stanley McChrystal on leadership lessons from Normandy, and it was just extraordinary. And it's the company exposed you to
Team of
different
teams, right?
Yeah, and exposed you to different alternatives. You got moved from running a good business to going to have to fix up a business that needed a significant turnaround.
Yep.
And you learn an awful lot about yourself. You learn an awful about how to operate teams in those difficult times. And I think it may be one of the things leaders struggle with these days is how do you adapt to the volatility we see in our markets these days. I don't think the volatility is going to change much. It's been high for a while. It's the amplitude is getting a little more significant right now. But I think
it's going to stay that way for a while, isn't it?
I think so.
That's how he operates when you say that.
When I look at that, so how do you operate a business on that? Most important thing, got to have a great culture, great performance culture. For me,
so what did you say? The word performance culture.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to nail that a bit later.
Right. So culture is by far the most powerful, sustainable point of competitive differentiation a company can have. That's my view. So you've got to have a great people agenda where you're investing in people throughout good times and difficult times, but you're always investing, growing and developing people. And then finally, you need a really strong operating mechanism, that drumbeat that drives alignment, drives focus, drives accountability, and then you use that operating mechanism and that operating rhythm to just drive the outcomes that you're looking for.
Okay. But you talked about performance. So you're also, during that period you were there, the pruning and the 10% pruning was pretty well known. Well, that was the language that was used.
Yeah.
Does that serve its purpose?
So,
or is it a bit more myth?
These days they call it fake news, right? But it's.
Was it really?
No.
Or was it something you had pride
So let
in?
me tell you what did happen, we had, which I still use today personally. You would assess the performance, the values, the culture, the leadership capability of your individuals on your team.
Okay.
I would have a look at who's in my top 20%. I'd have a look at my sort of highly valued 70%, and I'd have a look at my bottom 10%. The media would have you think that we would then take those folks in the bottom 10% out to the woodshed and do away with them. But that did not happen.
Okay.
That never happened. You did have conversations with them to make sure people understood what they need to do to improve, which you do today. Yeah. And if I think about you
but
do
if they don't improve,
right,
move on out, right?
Look, you have led thousands of recruitments over the years, right? I guarantee every one of those you've sat down with your client and helped them calibrate those individuals and against what that client was looking for, and you'd be having a discussion. You could use that tool exactly for that.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think it's important. Frankly, it's even more important for fast-growing companies.
But funny enough, I don't hear the word performance come up a lot these days.
Yeah. Well, as I had bosses often say to me, Steve, I appreciate the effort, but results are all that matter, right? And that's true. The scorecard is on the stock price. That's where it's at.
So how do you create the culture?
Culture is critically important. And again, it was probably the most significant point of differentiation at GE. Phenomenal culture, great culture of collaboration, reaching and searching everywhere, sharing ideas, both formal and informal connections throughout the company. That culture was created by doing what you would do to create any culture, and that is making sure that it's clearly articulated. You clearly articulate the values and the behaviours that you want, number one. Number two, that you assess performance against those. You're doing good on this, you need to improve here, stop doing that. And then third, most importantly, there has to be consequences, both good and bad.
Okay.
Right? So when people are doing a great job with regard to values, you got to put them up on a pedestal. You got to give them a promotion. You got to give them a few more options. And those who aren't, you got to have conversations that, look, you know, if you don't fix this in the next 6 months, you're going to have to find somewhere else to go.
Why did you join GE? Because you originally started your career in Westpac,
so
didn't you?
Westpac had sent me to New York.
All right.
And
So you didn't go to university, did you, or not?
Early
days after school.
Yeah, so I'm the fifth son of a bricklayer.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
And so my folks didn't really have a detailed knowledge of what's possible.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Fair enough.
And so there, growing up in the Shire, you.
So was I.
We lived in the seven of us in a 2-bedroom war service home.
And whereabouts were?
Miranda.
Oh, I'm going, yeah. Okay, down the road. Okay, right.
And what was encouraged, we were very highly principled.
Yep.
But also very, very strong work ethic. So what was coming out of high school, and I did well in high school, was you had to get a job. There was no question, right?
Yeah,
and you had to give your mum 25% of your take-home pay for board.
Yeah, fair enough.
That was the deal.
Yep.
Right?
Consequences.
Right. And so then when I started work, I joined the Bank of New South Wales. I was a teller. In those days, I was playing in the lower grades of the Sharks. And I had a desire to carry on with that, although there was no money in it back then. There was very little money in it in those days. But I had a desire to do that. When I started work at the Bank of New South Wales, that's when folks started putting the floodlights on opportunity. They're saying, why the heck don't you go to university? You could be doing more than what you're doing. And I'd never had that conversation at home. That's just who my folks were. And so...
And none of your mates went to uni
no, some did, but a lot didn't.
Yeah.
And so I went to university part-time, but I had to find a university that I could train for the Sharks at night, 3 nights a week.
Okay.
Right, so what's now, what was then university technology, you could go part-time.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
But you did night classes and they were
long days.
They were training nights, right?
Yeah.
And I had to clash. So I did it via correspondence. So
By correspondence, so it's not online. That's
no, it was before online existed. So
that's right.
So it was.
So how's correspondence work?
It was what's now Charles was then Charles Sturt. Today it's Mitchell.
Yeah,
it was Mitchell now. Mitchell then
And
Charles Sturt
now.
these days.
Yeah.
And they'd send you a book. They'd send you a big book, and you'd read it, and you do exercises, and you read the text, and you send back your work. Then they'd mark it.
Right. Okay.
All by mail.
So no tutorials.
No, you went to the university in Bathurst twice a year for about a week.
Jeez, that's hard.
It was, but that sort of taught me focus, discipline, and then what happens? Obviously, it was you grow up. As you come through. In my case, the Sharks, you sort of play all the junior grades.
Yep.
And
what position were you playing?
Mostly halfback and 5'8".
Yeah,
and
okay.
then you feel really good about yourself. You've got a good, healthy self-esteem. You think, and you're only playing your age group, right? So you think you're I got this nailed. I've got something going here.
Yep.
And then you play reserve grade,
Yep.
right? And you're playing against guys who are 10, 12 years older than. And that's when you realise that you're slow, you're not mobile, you're nowhere near as good as you think you are. So it's just like a slap across the face in your very first game. And you're just nowhere near good enough. And so you try that for a few years and you don't make the grade. And so then it obviously became more apparent to me then, I got to get this done, got to move more towards this focus and away from footy,
Okay.
because I wasn't going to have a career in footy. That was where it became pretty obvious to me.
So was there anyone who was back? Was there any sort of catalyst back, or any particular individual or mentor, or whatever you want to call it, using that language, saying, "Hey, mate, you've got a lot more potential than you see"?
There were just a number of folks I worked with around then. They moved me out of the branch. They put me into the corporate bank in town.
Yep.
They put me on executive development courses. So there was a lot of ecosystem encouragement that folks would help me, that would pump your tyres up and help you understand what was possible and then what you had to do to deliver on what was possible.
Where was the big break?
I did want to go overseas. I don't know, only because I was in financial services at the time, and the capital, the pinnacle of financial services, New York or London. And so, I said I'd love to work in New York or London. It'd be fantastic. Either of those would be great. And then they offered me up New York. And
So is this the competitive DNA transferred from
Could be.
sport? Saying, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it at the best level possible.
Could be that, and then it's probably focus, it's discipline.
Yep.
It's probably a bit of that.
All right. So someone backed you and said, "We're going to ship you overseas."
The company Westpac then said, "Yeah, we'll ship it to New York," and that was great. And at the time,
What year was that, Steve?
88.
Okay. Good times.
It was great. It was fantastic,
Yeah.
right? At that point in time, pretty well all money centre banks, so the Chase Manhattans, the Citibanks, the JP Morgans, those folks were having third world debt problems with Latin American debt and commercial real estate. So some of them were on their knees, and you were starting to see some of the consolidation occurring in that industry. And in those days, Westpac had a AAA rated balance sheet. And so they wanted me to go there and build a structured finance business that didn't use the balance sheet, basically. And we started up a securitization capability, which was great. It was a lot of fun. Figured it out. We then what we developed in New York, we brought back to Australia, and Westpac still has that capability today. Great team. And but when I first went there, I didn't know. I always saw the Americans as being bigger, better, faster. Everything was brighter, shinier. And I remember saying to my folks, "Look, I don't know if I can compete with these guys. I don't know if I'm good enough." And then I've had that conversation a number of years later when I met my current wife, who's a New Yorker. I said, "Look, if all this turns to custard because I'm not good." And when I was joining GE, I said, "Now, this is a real American company."
Yeah.
Right? If I don't know if I can hold my own. I've never been in this sort of this environment before. But I said,
Is it all facade?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I've got I often call the US a bit of a puzzle palace. It's a difficult place to understand. There's a lot of oxymorons, a lot of conflicting ideas. Never underestimate them. It's an extraordinarily ingenious workforce, highly flexible, incredibly talented people. A lot of really genuine, caring people. Now, the way social platforms work today and the internet works today, you may not get to see all those folks.
Yeah.
You get to see some of the fringe.
Yep.
But never underestimate them. They're good. They're really good.
All right. So you're in the US. You've turned up.
Yep.
You're making a bit of a headway for yourself.
Yep.
You're at Westpac.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you're doing well.
Yep. And then Westpac wanted me to come home, actually, and run the corporate bank. And I'd only just got married, right? And I said, "Guys, I'm not coming home. I'm staying here." I left. Fortuitously, at the exact same time, GE Capital approached me. They wanted to build a securitization capability, pretty well the same as what we built at Westpac, but they wanted to use securitization for their own balance sheet, so to securitize their own car loans, car leases, mortgages, things like that, plus also create that offer that service to customers. And so we built that inside GE, had a great team, built a great team, and that again went really, really well. The environment was right for it. A lot of the competitors were focused on cleanups and things. And because of the nature of those deals, every one of those deals, a small deal is over $100 million. So every deal would go to the board. So I was going to the board every month.
Right? Oh, and there's a pretty interesting guy as the chief executive at the time, wasn't there?
Exactly right. So Jack Welch was there. And so I worked for Jack for 10 years and worked for Jeff for 15. And so what happened was you get what's critically important in any career development and can often be viewed on the luck side as exposure.
Yep.
Right? That you get the exposure before or in front of the people that matter. And so I'd be presenting these deals. Then around 94, 95, I think it was.
Ever get daunted by it all?
I've always used self-doubt to double down on my preparation and make sure I dig deeper and make sure I'm over-prepared.
Okay.
And so what happened, Jack was driving the Six Sigma methodology.
Yep.
And each year on the first business day in January, the company would get top 300-400 leaders across the company together. And I was there one year, and it was down in Boca Raton, Florida. And Jack said, "Look, we're driving Six Sigma, where I want you to put your CEO successor in this role," which was really quite different than the way Motorola, Toyota, where they would get all their highly numerant quant jocks and stick them on the factory floors. Jack's genius was to say, "I want my leaders driving this." So he was driving it top down, not bottom up, which was something that I'm not aware other companies have done. And he wasn't pleased with the project, with the progress that we were making. And so he said, "When we get back at this meeting next year, I'm going to rank every one of you personally on how you've done with regard to implementing Six Sigma. I'm going to fire the bottom 5." And you knew he meant it, right? And he was heavily involved. He'd drive, he had an operating rhythm around it. So you present him projects to him personally over the year. And at that meeting the next year, he stood up in his opening comments. "Well, Bill Smith, Tom Jones, Bobby, they're not here today because even though they had great financial results, this is part of the company's culture we're driving. They weren't doing what they should be doing on Six Sigma." And then about a month or so after that, you got a call from Jack's secretary to go see him. And that was always a binary experience, right? It was either really good or really bad. And so you're shaking in your boots as you're sitting outside his office. And you go in, and he's incredibly authentic, and he's not a big man. He's shorter than I am.
Mm-hmm. Good halfback then.
Yeah, and he had a stutter, a pretty significant stutter. So,
yeah, right.
But he was an incredible brain, incredible communicator. But he said, "Steve, I love what you've been doing with securitization and the business you've built there. And I can see some early leadership signals. And I want to develop your leadership muscles. And he said, the challenge you got with being in securitization is you are the domain expert in this company with regard to securitization. And what people often misperceive is with a domain expertise, they often misperceive that as leadership. I want to see if you got genuine leadership. So I want to make you the Six Sigma leader for GE Capital, which at that point had 125,000 people. I think I had 10,000 green belts, 5,000 black belts, a couple of thousand master black belts. And I want you to drive this across the company. And I said, Jack, all due respect, I don't know how to count nor spell Six Sigma. He said, that's exactly why I want you to do it. Because in that situation, the only muscle you can rely on is your leadership muscle. How to grow, how to change, how to adapt, how to learn from people on your team, how to align and coordinate resources, how to inspire people. And so that, I did it. And
Also, a pretty strong part of the company, let's face it.
It was probably one of the most significant development experiences I've ever had, right? And I did that for 3 years, 4 years. And then he sent me to Europe. We had a complete train wreck in Europe after we made a dozen or more acquisitions that were poorly integrated. A, poorly bought and poorly integrated. B, secondly. And then and that was another part of the experience. I was actually sitting in the boardroom one day. And,
well, hold on, just back on that before we get to that sec. For everybody out there, GE Capital's focus during those days was what?
It was, back then it was more than half the company. Very large leasing company, doing all sorts of commercial leasing, bit of consumer auto leasing, big consumer business, consumer loans, personal loans, credit cards, private label credit cards through stores and things.
Yep.
We owned and leased, we're the largest owner of commercial aircraft in the world, owned 25% of the world's aircraft, leased them out to companies. We were one of the largest owner of commercial real estate in the world, where we'd buy, own real estate, develop it, buy a B grade building, develop it up to an A,
yeah,
and
right,
then
okay.
sell.
Didn't know that.
So we were the strategy was to play where the banks don't play or where the banks don't play well, right? So that was always the focus. You look for the soft underbelly of where banks, like playing banks here in the mortgage market. What's your competitive difference? It's
Not a
tough,
lot. Yeah,
right? It's hard. So don't go there.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So figure out where they don't play and or where they don't play well, and then go for it.
Okay.
So it was, and then back in those days, it was a lot of fun. Like there were plenty of years we doubled earnings. We'd go from 2 billion in earnings to 4 billion in earnings to 6 billion. Like it was a lot of fun. It was a big part of the company. But again, you got to remember, in the 80s and 90s, it was the best of times.
Yeah.
Pretty good credit times, growth right? Was almost double digit every year. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Right? It was a lot of fun. And then things changed after 9/11 and after Enron and after MCI WorldCom. A lot of things changed then.
All right, so go back. So you had your exposure into Europe. You're sorting out some problems there.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Jack calls you back in, does he?
Then I needed to, my folks, my mother had gotten run over by a car in Caringbah.
Right, okay.
And she broke a number of vertebrae and badly smashed up her arm. She was about 75, I think, then. And she was having a tough time after that. So I said, listen, I got to get home. Right? And by then, we had 3 kids. They were all born in Connecticut. And they were loving life in London. So we didn't really, other than that, we wouldn't have come back.
Yep.
So what we basically said, we'll come back, we'll let you run the Australian operation, but at the right time, we'll get you to run Asia, get you to run all the GE's operations down here. So they planned it out well, and it was a lot of fun. So we came back here, and it was, again, it was great when you come back here in the early 2000s, right? By 2010, 8, 9, in that range.
This was it finished by what?
2010.
Yeah.
But this was the second largest country in the world for GE by revenue and earnings.
Little Australia.
After the United States.
Is that right?
Yeah. So during the mining boom, we ran the table on every LNG project. Our oil and gas business, we got all our compressors, all our power gen on pretty well every LNG project in the country. Pretty well ran the table on every power plant we put into remote mining areas. We put in something like 112 power stations of varying sizes over 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, right.
The financial service business was cranking along. We're the largest bond issuer in Australia at the GFC. We're the largest commercial paper issuer in Australia. It was a lot of fun. It was a heck of a, and we had an incredible team. And most of those folks, almost all of them, have gone on doing a lot of great work running. Some of them running top 50 ASX companies today.
Absolutely.
And that we all worked on one team, but then it was so much fun.
So what is the GE way? Right, because let me ask two questions. What is the GE way? But let me propose something a little bit different to you. You do your Six Sigma. You come through and you get your different belts. All right? But doesn't that lead in, just take the anti-view here, Steve. Doesn't it lead to sometimes same thinking in the room all day long?
One of the great things about the culture of GE, there's a lot of great things about the culture, but one of the great things about the culture, and Welch often espoused this, so did Jeff, was you've got to face reality. Don't look at the world as how you want it to be. Look at it how it actually is. Right? And in business, we often have this perception of we want the world to look like this and we're going to put a strategy and a plan in place to go do that. But the reality is something very, very different.
Okay.
And the other thing, the conversation inside the company was just fearlessly candid. Like some people would find it confronting, but it was very candid. And it's a bit of a blue-collar company. So, it was a little bit of rough and tumble. I loved it. I thought it was great, but it was authentic. It was you knew exactly where we were going, what we needed to do, how you needed to perform. The clarity, there was something incredibly powerful about the clarity you had, and of what we all needed to do to achieve the outcomes we were looking. So one of the other tricks was to have that degree of clarity, that degree of candor, but there's an incredible degree of collaboration, of sharing, we came up, when I was running Six Sigma for GE Capital, we did something on dramatically improving the effectiveness of sales teams. And for the best part of 8 months, I'd get a call from businesses all around the world saying, Steve, can you come talk to us about what you did? And it was, you could see where Welch was traveling the world, and he said, see this problem, call Steve. He'll come and help you with it. Right? And so you would then go to the insurance business and help them figure it out. You then go to GE Aviation and go figure it out. And it was this incredible, despite a very high performance culture, despite being very candid, you knew exactly where you were and how you were doing. And Welch there in some of the later years, he'd handwrite your performance review, right? And he'd do hundreds of these things. Like, it was really quite incredible. I still have all sorts of little handwritten notes from him, right? Steve, doing a great job here. I think you could be doing more here, right? And very, very powerful. It's not for everybody. And if you combine that, right, if you combine that with a strong culture, with a strong operating system, you can lift everybody. Now, I am sure over the years, in your career,
Yep.
you've gone after many GE people.
Sure
right?
have.
And
They don't fit everywhere either.
that's what I'm about to say. So some of the people, you've got to know who, some of the people are the beneficiaries of that strong operating system. And if they go to a company where those operating
They're not
mechanisms,
going to go.
they fail.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have the ones who are coordinating, leading, driving that, you'll get better outcomes.
Yeah, and they'll bring
So
everybody
when
with
people
them.
say, yeah, I've tried getting a GE guy and it didn't work, the reason why it didn't work is they were people who were good,
Yep.
and they were lifted by the company's culture and the operating mechanisms to be very good.
Yep.
I look at that and go, you know what? That's a really good sign of a company.
Yeah.
Really good.
What did you like most about Jack?
He
From a leadership
yeah,
perspective,
so
right? We're talking leaders.
his value, the value he placed on culture and investment in people was second to none. He was an incredible communicator. So he had this knack of saying something like, be number one or two or get the hell out.
Yep.
Right? The amount of people over the years have said that to me, that actually lasted for 3 years, from 85 to 88. Right? And the reason was he had all these businesses. He was trying to get the teams to figure out how do we get out of some of these industries, things like that.
Yep.
But what it ultimately did was drive a behaviour of, and you get there into a presentation, says, look, Jack, as well as we're number one in New Jersey. Right. And so it drove this inward-looking behaviour. So he scrapped it.
Yeah,
quickly,
gotcha.
right?
Okay, right.
And so he had this incredible knack of being able to drive 300,000 people with 4 or 5 words, right? And having that, I've learned over the years that we often try and make things a wee bit too complex. And I'm sure you've noticed this, as you move up in an organisation, one of the most powerful tools you have is your communication ability. And what you...
Simplicity.
when you try and make that simple, if I think about during the financial crisis, we were just trying to get the boat back to shore.
Yep.
Like, it was really difficult,
Yep.
right? And so he just cut everything out, right? And he said, here's what we're focused on. If it's not these two things, we're not going to do it. We accelerated our operating mechanism. Quarterly meetings became monthly. Monthly became weekly. Weekly became daily. So you dramatically accelerated the cadence of everything you did.
Yep.
You put listening mechanisms out to understand what was going on with customers. I'd have a call with all our salespeople at 5 o'clock every day.
Would you really?
Yeah. And so what are you hearing? What are you hearing right out there? What's going on in the market? What do you hear from competitors? Right. And how's it? So you create this. But the power of being able to do that is just the simplicity of this is all you got to focus on, this and this. So when I think about communication, and this is a thing I learned from Jack, but he didn't specifically teach me, but I've learned this from a lot of GE leaders. When I'm going to speak to a group or to an individual, I think about a few things. One is, what are the messages I want to communicate here? Very important. Number 2, what action do I want these people to take? And 3, and most importantly, how do I want them to feel? Right? If I want them ready to go climb Mount Everest,
They better feel pretty good.
I change my I flex my style, I flex my delivery, the way I deliver. If for some reason they've been working on something that's overdue, and I want them to feel a little intimidated, I change my style. Something on occasion, rarely, I've just got up and walked out of the room.
Oh, you done that, have you?
And just get there, guys, we've talked about this for too long. I get up and walk out. Now,
That sends a message.
I would only do that once a year at best, because if you do it too often, but it's incredibly powerful. So the concept of understanding what you want to say, understanding the actions you want people to take, and then most importantly, how do you want them to feel? You want to feel awesome. Your job then is to inspire these people, to pump their tires up, to make them feel great, to make them realise that the impossible is possible. And then that's what leadership is.
In that form of leadership, is that the old classic? You said, Jack was saying, go and see Steve. Jack was saying, go and see Steve to sort this out. I'll find out what he's up to. Does that mean he's walking the floor non-stop?
Without a doubt. The company.
So does that still exist as much as it used to, Steve? Because we've now
I
for new technology?
So. I suspect so. You were expected, and that was one of the tiring things about the company, is you're expected to be in market with your teams,
Yep.
with your customers. That was expected. From 1998 to 2014, 2015, I flew over 1 million miles every year. But that's frequent flyer miles, so there's 600,000 or something, depends on your airline, of miles every year.
Right.
It was grueling, and you're expected to operate 24 hours a day.
Are you?
Yeah, and you would, you'd 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week. I'd be on a 3 in the morning call into Fairfield, Connecticut. Right. Certainly when you're on the corporate executive team, you would, the years where I flew from here to New York 16 times in a year. And then for 4 years, I flew from Sydney to either Tokyo, Shanghai, Beijing every Sunday night, do one intra-Asia flight during the week, come home Saturday morning, watch the kids sport, hang out with them, the family on Saturday night, fly out again Sunday.
So why'd you do it?
I loved it.
Why? What did you love it? That's the big thing. What did you love most about it?
The people, the culture. I found an incredible alignment between the company's value systems, very principled, performance-oriented.
Yep.
Huge investment in caring for people. I found that just aligned almost perfectly with my own values. There was one area where it didn't align, and that was with GE is not a customer-focused company. We always wanted to be, but we never were. It was a technology, finance-driven company.
Yeah, okay.
Right, and in fact, when Jack put me into the Six Sigma role, he said, one of the things I want you to drive, I want you to do this for the whole company. He said, I want you to make us a customer-focused company. And I'm sitting here going, if you can't, how the hell am I going to do this? That's what I was thinking. But it was simple things. And so with regard to that, I sent a note back to Jack. About a week later, I gave it some thought. And you thought, what drives this company? Its value systems, its behaviours, its culture. And when you looked at our values, the word customer was never mentioned.
Is that right?
Ever. Just now. Or it certainly was towards the end. And so all I did was take the value system and I insert customer in 3-4 places and I send it to him. And he changed it, our January meeting, which was probably 4 or 5 months later. He didn't use it, my wording, but customer was in the values, and that's how we drive it.
How much were you across competition, or you're an organisation saying, "Don't worry about them; they've got to follow us"? So you hear different views on this one.
Yeah, I've yet to work in an industry where there's no or poor competition. It's always there. I think you've got to understand your competitive differentiation. In a place like GE, for it's often the your technology versus theirs, but so what often happens is you go out with your teams in healthcare, and the sales guys in the imaging group would say, "Here's why our MRI is better than Siemens."
Yep.
Right. I grew up in a world where what are the problems you, customer, are trying to solve, and how can we help you solve them in a way that's going to get you a better outcome? And then, so I had this customer-centered approach to how I engaged with customers, whereas most of the company has a technology-centered because of that.
Yeah,
right?
gotcha. Yeah, okay.
And a lot of industrial companies are like that. They're technology-centered because it's what makes them different. That's the point of differentiation. I think you've got to be across what your customers are doing, your competitors are doing. But at the end of the day, you got to understand why customers value what you do and why that's different from them.
And how do you give the say Siemens versus you guys, technology, whatever the case is going to be, the point of differential, right? Where's the freedom come to try things at GE? Because you got to, you're going to be ahead of everyone. Yeah. You've got to be taking risk all day long, don't you? In some form of risk, right?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So, again, the company, and this was something that ML put in place because he got frustrated, and even today I get frustrated in some of the companies I work with the speed it takes with research and development and how to launch new products. And it's hard. It is really hard. And it always takes longer. Always takes longer than you expect. And there's this fine balance between pushing your team too hard and making sure you do get it right. What ML did, he created these. He felt there was a period of time where there were too many folks getting involved, right? And what often happens in companies, there are a lot of people who can say no, but there are very few who can say yes.
Okay.
Right, and so he went through it and said, you don't get a vote if you can only say no, right? The only people who get a vote are the ones who say yes or no. Right?
Okay, yep.
But he also then created this, an operating mechanism where the businesses would present what he called, it's a corny name, but it's imagination breakthroughs. And the mechanism is simply there so he can shortcut the approvals, right? Is everybody okay? What's your issue here? Legal, boom, okay, I'm okay with it, get rid of it, right? And you shortcut. And so we've used that in the company I chair, Nanosonics, a medical device company, we use that. Michael Kavanagh, the CEO, uses that technique in a different way where you can intervene, shortcut, accelerate. Because sometimes you need those folks saying no, and you need to understand, it's important to understand why there's a concern, but then you just need to assess it.
Thanks for watching the No Limitations podcast, brought to you by Blenheim Partners, board and executive search firm. As a trusted advisor, we work with Australian listed groups, multinational corporations, large private companies, and social impact organisations on their most critical people choices to drive change, prepare for growth, and outperform their peers. To learn more about Blenheim Partners and executive search, visit our website, blenheimpartners.com. And now, back to the show. Leadership in the US, as you said, it was shinier, louder, everything else when you first started. and a little bit off-putting to commence with, and obviously you build up your confidence, etc. Leadership in US versus leadership in Australia.
Yeah.
What's the big differences?
Um.
The top I'm talking about.
Yep. Yep. Top of companies, top of
Yeah.
yeah. When I look, I've always found the US to be a bit of a puzzle palace. I've lived there a long time, love the country. My wife goes back, spends time with family 3 times a year for about a month, 6 weeks each time. I'm there a lot. Love the place, love the people, enormous admiration, respect for them. It was interesting. I just read the biography of Alexander Hamilton
Oh yeah.
by Ron Chernow,
Interesting, wasn't it?
which is the book that the play was.
Yeah.
Great book, 800 pages, but worth every bit of it. And what had occurred to me is a lot of the idiosyncrasies we find, those outside of the US find unusual, they existed back then. And this was during the War of Independence.
Yeah, right.
And shortly afterwards, certainly before the Civil War. And so you're sort of starting to see the green shoots of a lot of the things that people find unusual looking outside.
So the ideology.
Yeah, it's and so I found that really, really interesting. The US has it changed a lot after 9/11. That rocked it, and just like it changed a lot after Pearl Harbor. And up until then, made the call to not get involved in the Second World War, and then of course went all in thereafter. And then as a result of that, got into a couple of wars, Korean War, Vietnam War. After 9/11, they got into 2 wars, spent $16 trillion on a couple of wars. And that investment didn't occur back home. And so I think what's happened is a lot of what you see, certainly with all the political elite, is sort of a reaction to that. I think also there's been, it feels like there's a loss of trust of its institutions over there. And it was
Big questions, isn't there?
yeah, and I was actually thinking about this about a year ago when people were talking about how do you regulate artificial intelligence, and I'm thinking, wow, it's like trying to regulate breathing. How the heck do you do that? I don't know. But what that caused me to do was to reflect back on the internet era and the big social platforms.
Yep.
And say, what are the benefits? Overwhelmingly, the benefits have been phenomenal, right? It's been fantastic for everybody. But what are the things that are negative and that you wished you didn't have? And would we have been able to have regulated those out? And for me, what we lost in the internet era was the truth. You can go on to any platform and say pretty well anything you want, and the volume's greater, the amplitude's greater, the distribution's massive, and a lot of readers believe it, whether it's true or false. And then you get politicians doing the same. When you lose truth, you've lost trust. And that's where I think the US, I think there's a view of that. Now, some of that used to exist pre the internet, but the volume and distribution wasn't as great. It's much more sort of focused. So I think the US is struggling probably more than most countries by virtue of that. if you or I told the markets pretty well whatever we wanted to tell them and it not being true, right, there'd be really significant action, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You'd be, ASIC would be there with lawyers at 6 spaces. It'd be tough.
Mm.
Why that doesn't happen to politicians, I don't know. I think in the corporate field, I think there's still a lot of great leaders, right? You got to admire.
Do they think differently than our leaders in corporate land? Are they more bold? Do they understand risk? Do they understand failure differently to how we see things?
I think it's pretty similar. In fact, I don't think it's. I haven't worked for any other US company, so it's hard for me to tell. When I talk to, I've got buddies in Amazon, and I reckon it's a phenomenal company. And they can make decisions at speed and get things done. They invest at speed. They're prepared to make mistakes. With folks at Hewlett Packard and Oracle, and it seems none of these companies are perfect, but it does seem very good. I'm sure there are great leaders in Europe, but I think there's probably fewer of them, just because of the ecosystem within which people grow up with over there.
Yep.
And so it's challenging. As you asked me before, where have all the leaders gone? I often ask myself the same question. I ask folks like you to say, who's the leadership factory for finance people these days, right? And there used to be a couple of really good ones.
We talked about it earlier before we started, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's changing.
Yeah.
And it's actually getting fewer and harder to find.
And so I
different form of style of leadership too.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no doubt it's
We still want the same, we still want outcomes.
Without a doubt. But stakeholder management is far more complicated today than when I was running businesses.
Taking too much time? And is it all necessary?
I don't think it is all necessary, right? If I look at what's been imposed on companies and boards over the years, what I'd love to see is the outcomes of all that. And it's almost impossible to find, that you have this quite a significant impost and cost and burden imposed on people. Do you get better outcomes? And I'd love to see the data on that, but of course there is none. And the sort of the regulators and the political folks who put a lot of that in place, they measure themselves on input, not outputs. Right?
Yeah,
they
right.
get there and say, I spent $2.4 billion to save 1,000 jobs in Whyalla.
Yeah.
Right? That's the input.
Yeah.
Well, okay, now what's the output from that?
Yeah. They never say we were told to spend 2.4, but we actually pulled it off for 1.8. You never get that one, do you?
No. So it's definitely it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge companies have. So, okay, if you're in an industry then, you're leading businesses.
Yep.
You've got to be great at leading business through volatility.
Okay, all right. So leadership these days. So a few things have been happening in the last couple of years. You're exposed a lot more. So Jack Welch wasn't anywhere near exposed as he would be today.
No,
correct?
The scrutiny.
Social media, you got people firing stuff left, right, centre from your own company.
Yep.
Can be doing that.
Yep.
You got the invasion of every Tom, Dick and Harry, who's everything from a podcaster to a newsreader.
Yep.
Putting commentary out there.
Yep.
Okay. You got politicians coming in left, right, centre, making commentary.
Yep.
And also you got this whole thing where I thought there was a bit of a mix, and Australia went through this process. There's been a couple of big social issues.
Yep.
And then businesses got involved.
Yep.
Uninvolved, directors signing things in newspapers and putting their name to statements, etc. That's a lot different than what Jack Welch was doing in your day.
Yep. It's much more complicated. And so for me, as I think about that, how do you operate in that environment?
Yeah.
Double down on your culture, right? Make sure you got an awesome culture and you work on, and a culture isn't something that pops up on your login page. It's not a plastic card you get. Culture is something that lives, that's part of the DNA, it's part of the fabric of the company. And when you see it, when you see great, You got to reward it. When you see unacceptable, you got to take action. But whatever you want your culture to be, you've got to really focus on that, because culture trumps all. Culture, pardon the pun, culture will eat strategy for lunch every day of the week, and culture will also overcome operational deficiencies. So for number one is have a great culture. Number two, have great operating mechanisms. And then, not in this order, got to have great people and invest in people, grow, develop. And I don't know, really help them become leaders, not managers.
Okay,
Right.
big point.
So
There's a lot of good managers floating around.
There's a big difference, right? Leaders have a view that they're there to serve their people. Managers have an expectation that the people are there to serve them. It's very different. So, as a chair of a company, I'm a servant. I'm there to serve shareholders. I'm there to serve the rest of the board members. I'm there to support the management team, right? All those. And that's the biggest difference. If you're thinking about the conversations you're having with your team, are they task-focused, or are they about developing you, making you a better leader, better person? Because if you get that right, the task will happen, right? You won't have the operational deficiencies. You won't have the strategic missteps, right? And you'll know how to respond during volatility, right? You know, and so with a CEO, you want
It's a little bit like the Stanley McChrystal days, as you were talking about, correct?
Exactly. Right. Every plan was thrown out the window the minute they hit the sand.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody had to what did they know they needed to do? Get to the top of the hill. That was it. Forget everything else. Get to the top of the hill. And often, there are plenty of times in business where it feels like the first 5 minutes are Saving Private Ryan and the bullets are flying overhead, and it feels pretty chaotic. And the most important thing in that type of environment is just provide clarity. What are the key messages you want your team to know? What action do you want them to take? How do you want them to feel?
Let me throw one to you, Steve. Like you read and it's great. You read all the business books and the leadership manuals and everything else, and they say build a great culture and surround yourself with the very best people.
Most don't do it.
Most, yeah, of course they don't. That goes out the window for many different reasons. The other part is, but if you're building a business, how the hell do I surround myself with the very best people? I can't afford them.
Yeah.
Now, so it's good to go into GE. She's a good beast. Okay, it got rebuilt, no doubt about it. But let's talk about, say, for the entrepreneurs out there and the different form of leadership we're seeing for the tech groups, which are multiplying or trying to multiply and scale.
Yep.
You get that language quick.
Yep.
But culture is everything for them as well.
Yep.
So how do you build this when you got, go and get the best person, et cetera, et cetera? Hey, man, I can't afford them.
Yeah, so
Good theory.
I would argue if you're getting someone to join you for the pay, you got the wrong person, right? So your job as a leader is to help people understand why this is the best place to work and how you're going to benefit and grow over the medium and long term, and the wealth creation you're going to enjoy over that period of time may not be a 15% increase in salary now, but may be something substantially different. So you got to sell the vision, you got to sell the opportunity, and then if you think about the overall absolute cost, 5 really great people will beat 10 average ones every day of the week. And so, just broaden their roles, spans and layers, and give them a more enriching and challenging role is the way I would do it.
So why has leadership, maybe a bit harsh here, Steve, why is it dissipated?
Yeah,
And has it?
I don't know if I don't know if it has. I don't know if how. I can think of a few leaders I've got in the country. I've got a lot of admiration for, and
Okay,
working through.
a handful.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Is that enough, is it?
yeah. Certainly, I can't identify the leadership factories like we used to.
Yeah.
I don't know where they are. I suspect
Is the emphasis even placed on to create a leadership factor anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. I think probably the high end consultancy firms like the McKinseys, the BCGs, they're very good. They're very good. It's interesting, but it can be from anywhere. Years ago, this is probably in 1995. There was a Fortune magazine in the US, which I'm sure you've read, and what they did this analysis of what company builds the best leaders. And so what they did is they looked at all the companies being led by who were previously at a different company before, right? And the company that built the best leaders, and they tried to do this quantitatively, was GE. And the way they did is when people left GE, they went to another company. How much did the market cap change, and was it sustainable over time?
Yep.
And the two companies that changed, that created the most, was GE and McKinsey.
Is that right?
And that was impressive. But then they went into saying what was the approach to hiring talent, and it was funny. I still remember this. McKinsey said, we hire the best Ivy League people from the best Ivy League universities. And GE said, we hire the ice hockey team. So it was just smart, hardworking people who get in there and fight it out.
Well, I was just about to ask you, what do you look for? Or what did you look for? You obviously walked in, you had to do some restructure, etc.
Yeah, I always, always look for the fire in the belly. People who've got the capability, people who know how to connect and engage with people, strong leaders, good communication capability. As you move up, that's your most powerful tool with any stakeholder. And I've never looked for Ivy League ever. Fired plenty of Ivy League folks because they got the smarts, but they don't have the fire in the belly. They don't have that genuine passion, the work ethic you're looking for. And so for me, it's authenticity, being able to connect, engage with people, inspire people, work with a variety of stakeholders. And it's investors, regulators, employees, customers. It's complex.
Okay. Let's take it back to geopolitical for the hell of it. Okay. You've lived in different parts of the world. You've seen Europe, you've seen US, you've seen Asia, and you've seen Australia. So look, maybe just big question. Where are we, and what are you seeing going on?
Yeah.
And then for Australia, where's our opportunity?
So it certainly feels like there's an awful lot of tail risk out there right now. That's what it does feel like that.
Or was it just hand grenades coming over the top, to get to the table? I'll try to figure that one out.
Yeah, it feels like they're shaking the tree. I think one thing to keep in mind, right, the reason why President Trump is using tariffs, it's one of the few things he can use without congressional approval. So why is he using tariffs to solve fentanyl issues? Because he can get it done, put something out there, looks like activity, and doesn't need to get Congress to approve it.
Yeah, okay, yep.
So it's important. That'll tire at some point.
Yeah.
Right. Having said that, when I look at the US, if the US is successful, there will be more plants and more investment back into that country. Right? And it is an incredibly competitive country. As a side point, when I was my last job in GE, we were looking to relocate the manufacturing of one of our truck wheel assembly plants. And we look at the world. We end up building that plant in Dallas, Fort Worth. Low-cost electricity, great labour, high skill, flexible workforce. That was the best place in the world to do it. So the US can be incredibly competitive, is incredibly competitive, number one. So I think you're going to see a lot more investment come back in. The automotive manufacturers are saying they're going to bring more there, the chip manufacturers, right? So all those investments need commodities. So that may play into GE's benefit. When I look at Europe, it certainly seems to me the European Union as a whole only, I could be totally wrong here, it's just my perception, seems to really get some things done when there's a crisis. So they work their way through the GFC and got some things done. They work their way through the energy crisis immediately after the invasion in Ukraine and got some things done. Maybe this will jolt them into helping Germany get out of its economic malaise.
Yep.
It's in, the Germans have got a tough gig. When you look at the DAX, so the stock index there, 60% of the revenues of the DAX come from the US.
Oh, do they?
So they've got a very heavy reliance on the United States. So they're going to have to make some tough calls and restructure and become more productive and become more effective. So if that happens, that could help Australia, right? They're going to need to do that, need commodities and some of the things we do well. And then if I look at China, China's going through its Congress right now. They may well decide to completely resolve the property bubble, right? Because you got a lot of people there who bought apartments at 100,000 that are now 10,000, right? Right, and so they may realise they need to take into that and then resolve that. At the moment, they've been sort of pushing the can down the road.
Yep.
They resolve that in total, get the economy going again. They're going to need a lot of what Australia has. So I can paint a scenario, whether that's going to happen or not. On the other side, I can certainly see some things turning to custard too. Like, it's going to get difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also see plenty of opportunity here. And I think having the ability to adapt, be flexible, respond quickly is critical.
Do we have that ability at the moment?
Certainly when you look at the Australian economy, I think our biggest concern is, and it's just been, it's not a recent phenomenon, is generating productivity growth, right? And a series of governments have been unsuccessful in doing that, and then the latest government that's got further away from us, not closer to it, and with various industrial relations and things like that, industrial relations law changes. So the way I look at these things is it's industry's job to lead, right? We've got to get out there and lead en masse.
But are we?
No.
So why not?
No.
There's no swinging after the event happens.
It's hard, right? It's difficult. All the stakeholder management. It is very difficult to do it. And when we went through the financial crisis, I thought we might see a fair bit of change, not only here but around the world. Most countries, took a long while to get through that. When we went through COVID,
yeah, but we didn't go through anywhere near as much as the Northern Hemisphere did. Ours was a bleeding nose compared to what they faced. Let's be realistic about that. We do carry on a bit, don't we?
Certainly, from from the GFC and for COVID, we were a light touch compared, but it still impacted a lot of people. But I just look at that and then think, if I'm leading a business, what have I got to do?
Mm-hmm.
I've got to make sure, understand where we're going, be prepared to change. You've got to be agile, because governments can implement something. And honestly, we saw this at Origin Energy, with changes the government would make on gas policy, on electricity pricing, and it come overnight.
Yep.
But Frank Calabria and the team have done a phenomenal job at navigating a highly volatile environment in very difficult circumstances.
Well, very hard to place bets when the
It's
keeps changing
certainly in
every
a
day.
long-term industry like that. Certainly in a long-term industry, but there were plenty of times you'd wake up and you'd see something in the paper and go, "Hang on, we didn't know about that." So there's no genuine consultation, despite what's said. So it's
which
it makes
is
it
amazing.
challenging.
Bearing in mind, we're only a little country with the opportunity to pick the phone up and speak to each other.
It is. So what's the root cause? Leadership. I come back to it all the time. If you have great leaders, good things happen.
Do we have great leaders in politics in Australia?
I can't recall one.
So, okay, if we put the G cap on, how do we build it and change it? Because we're in trouble. Because it's not going to get any better if we don't start thinking about changing it.
There have been a couple of attempts at that. Who was the Governor General?
What, sacked Whitlam?
No. The Governor General, he was on the board of Qantas for a while. He was the military leader.
Cosgrove.
Cosgrove.
Yeah.
He was working with a couple of folks, and I was asked at the early stages to see if I could facilitate. And it was to build leadership. He and his successor, I think, worked on it.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I did.
And with a few others to start building that. I'd do that. I would do that. If I was the Prime Minister, that'd be one of the things I'd do. Build. If I look at China, right, I actually have a lot of admiration for China. Back in 2014, I spent 6 weeks, and I was...
Yeah, go on. Yeah, what was this about? I read a bit about this. Go on.
Went to the party school.
Yeah, so what is that?
It's cool. So, over the years, GE had a leadership academy that was called Crotonville, about an hour and a half north of New York City. And it was phenomenal. And it's where all, when you went to Crotonville, it was like going to Mecca. Right? It was so good. The culture was, you felt the culture, you felt the values, you learnt so much about yourself, and you learnt so much from others. And so about a long time now, it was in the 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s, Jack Welch invited about 50 of our customers from China to come to the leadership school and do the exact same training we put our own senior leaders through.
Yeah, right.
And he added a week on up front to take them to Washington and teach them about decision making and how to do that in Washington, or how that all happens in Washington. We did that for decades. And what Jack insisted is, you as the business leaders, you had to fly in, right? And you'd hang out with these leaders. So you'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, you sit in class with them. You got to know them really well. Times I've gone to China, I've met the CEO of Shenhua Coal, and he shakes your hand. He says, I was in the class of 98, right? It was that powerful.
Yeah, right.
After the first year we did that, the Chinese government said, it's called the Centre of Organisational Development, the COD. It looks after about the top 83 million people in the Communist Party, the state-owned enterprises, and the government, right, the people who govern the country. And they said, we love this, but we want to send who we want to send, and they may not be GE customers, right? And we said, okay, no problem. And so there was times I'm sitting there, hanging out with, the CEO of China Mobile, right, which not in our industry, but that's okay.
Yep.
Right, and they sometimes send government officials. And so we built this, we would put hundreds of folks through it. Then in 2013, the Central Organisation of Development wrote to GE and said, we'd like to invite 20 GE executives to come to China for 6 weeks. We're going to do a week or two in Peking University, and we'll learn about culture and social aspects, how the country works, decision making. And then you're going to go to the party school, where all the leaders of the Communist Party and the state-owned go, and you're going to go through the same leadership training they go through. And so the first week or so at Peking University, Jack Ma comes and talks to us, the Attorney General, the chairman of CNOOC, the chairman of Sinopec. It was awesome. It was so good. Then we went to the party school. Was a little basic, but very good, and you could see a lot of the GE stuff sort of popping up here and there. And then we went and visited Intel's operations there, General Motors and SAI, Shanghai Auto.
Oh, yeah.
We visited Huawei. We visited Comac, the airframe manufacturer. We probably visited 20 companies all over the country and spent a day with each, meeting their teams, understanding what they're doing, how they view the market, how they want to go global, and it's a massive investment in leadership. And one of the things that's interesting about China, and I think Singapore is similar in some ways, the smartest people in China work for the government. Smartest people in Singapore work for the government.
They get paid for it.
And so, you don't have too many folks coming out of university these days. Yep,
yeah.
I want to work for the government.
Yeah.
And so it gets back to how do you create that environment?
Yeah.
And that's leadership. You've got to have great leaders, create a great environment that people want to be a part of, that people are inspired by, that they can grow and develop. And you can, one of the other things I always found important for me was, it's always important to work with people that are going to take your brain to a place you wouldn't take it, right? They're going to challenge your thinking. They're going to, and you can do that in a way that's thoughtful and respectful and polite. So I've always tried to meet people and connect with people who think very, very differently to me, so I can take my brain with them. So if you can create that environment inside a political system, and it's hard, right? It's really difficult. It seems like democratic systems pretty well everywhere are at their limit. It feels like the US system is not representing their people well.
Yeah.
It's full of octogenarians, and that just can't be good.
No.
And it's not good. It's obviously not good. And so what happens? People lose trust again.
So if we look at that, and if we don't make the change here in terms of thinking about what your structure is or something similar, or bringing parties together to think longer term as opposed to just opposing each other all day long and taking pot shots all day long, which is pretty banal at the end of the day, right? Yeah. And very disappointing. Where are we going to be?
I'm still highly optimistic.
Yeah, but what in? Resources? What else outside of that?
The things, certainly I look at some of the things I'm involved in. Like I look at our health tech sector here. You go to Macquarie Park, wow. We've got some awesome medtech companies.
Are they going to stick around here, or are they going to go to the US?
No, you got ResMed, you got Cochlear, you got Nanosonics, you got
CSL.
you got CSL. Right, we've got some awesome medtech companies, and it's something we're world class at, absolutely world class at. So I think, if I have this conversation with my kids, they're almost all in their 30s these days, but I often say to them, if I was leaving university today, I'd either work in the energy sector or the health sector. Not so much you could work in the delivery of health services, so as a clinician, or the health sector in its broadest terms. Those two sectors, they're undergoing dramatic change. They are, to me, they look incredibly exciting industries to work in. We've got, certainly in the health, the med tech sector, we've got a lot of capability here. We're world class on mining, and it's a necessary, important industry. We're really good with gas, energy generation. The grid we have here, despite all the criticisms that we hear, it's one of the most competitive energy markets on the planet. That's good. That's good. So, there's there's technology that has been developed in most of the big energy, but certainly I'm familiar with it at Origin. The companies around the world want that technology. How do you manage? So, for example, you today, if you're a customer with Origin, manage your pool pump, your hot water heater, AC, all these things, and they will manage it with you, so it gets turned off, comes on at the appropriate time, it works for you, so that you get the most efficient delivery of energy, most cost effective. Because what happens during the day, like today out there's a bit of a breeze blowing, the sun's shining, the energy costs go negative during the day. It goes minus 50, minus $70 a megawatt. So
Goes up during the night.
and so what happens then is, how do you take advantage of that? Right? You have battery. So it's how do you, because the grid is, it's built with an awful lot of redundancy. It's as if you built the Sydney Harbour Bridge so that you never had a traffic jam on there.
Yeah.
Right? So it's 50 lanes, 60 lanes wide, and there's a lot of time there's not much going on, and 2 times a day there's a lot going on.
Yep.
The grid's built for 60 lanes wide.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So there's an awful lot of efficiency you can get with technology these days, with solar, with wind, with batteries, but you still need gas. You can't have all renewables without gas. We need gas. It's not possible to do it solely with renewables. But you're able to coordinate and orchestrate all these assets out there, thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Now, Origin does that today in a major way, at a much greater scale than anyone else does, probably in the world. But certainly in this country, there's many US utilities are asking to see how to do it. And so we've got a lot of great people in this country, a lot of great talent. It's still, I think, one of the best countries in the world to live in, and as frustrated as we get, and it's still great. We've got a very good healthcare system.
Yep.
We hear all the bad things about it, but quality and accessibility are world class. Right? We've got a great energy system, one of the more competitive. Our education system, everyone has access to education. Are there improvements? Yeah. But it's pretty damn good. So I am more than a glass half full guy. It's easy to criticise things.
That's easy on the sideline, right? Yeah.
It's easy. the most important thing to do is understand reality. Where are you at? What needs to happen? Go pack your head in a scrum and go get on with it.
All right. Well, if we speak reality, by the time we release this, we've got an election in play. Okay. What would be your advice? I'm going to ask two parts to this question. Short term to business, bearing in mind we've got an election coming up.
Yep.
Do they get on the front foot a little bit more? Do they start saying what they need to say because it's too late, or whatever strategy they should think about? Second part, long term, what should business start doing differently?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start at government. We need to get productivity going, right? And there's a couple of main drivers to that. One of them's tax.
Yep.
Our tax policy, and it's going to take leadership to be able to get it through because it is not efficient or effective as it could be. We're going to be in a situation where baby boomers will be about 38% of the population, and workers will be a much smaller percentage than there are today. So the straight income tax model is not going to work.
Get us there. Yep.
So we need to fix that, and that will also help productivity. And we know what to do there, right? Economists know what to do. Treasury knows what we do. So it gets down to being able to help lead the country on that journey. Here's the pathway forward. Here's why we've got to do it. Here's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I think the industrial relations environment, it's interesting to note that although we've got a Labor government, it feels like, I haven't seen any data on it, but it feels like we've had more industrial activity than I can recall for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting. And so I think that's, we've got to get productivity there. I do worry, and again, I just want to be a good ancestor, right? Most of this won't affect me or you, right? But I do want this country to be great and this world to be great for our kids and their kids. It feels like, as we've gone through the last few years, that we're creating, I'm not saying we've created, but I think we're creating this environment of expectations. Things are a little tough. They're a little harder, and sometimes for some folks, they're very tough. So what's the government doing it for me? What are you doing for me? What are you giving me? We've got this. Now, when we grew up in the Shire together, there was none of that going on. You went out, you got another job, or your dad got another job, or whatever you did.
Well, it was almost insulting to ask for a handout.
And so, as a result, I thought I read, and you should fact check this data, but one of the papers this week was we've got the highest spending the government as a percentage of GDP since the Second World War. Mm. We haven't even had a recession yet. Yeah. I sit there. I know the media say it's a crisis or a catastrophe, but at the end of the day, we haven't had a recession. Employment's pretty good, right? Costs went up. Yep. We've seen these movies before, but the response seems to be excessive. That's one person's view. In terms of companies, what organisations, you just got to get on with it. You just got to. That's just noise in the background. Have you ever stopped making an investment in a country or somewhere because of a political action? I never have. When I hear some CEOs say Australia's uninvestable, right? I worked for a company that invested a lot of money in this country over the years, and there was a lot of noise and stuff. No one inside GE ever said, "Hey, Steve, you worried about that?" No, you've got to look through to the long term. You don't worry. This is just all short-term noise. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to be aware of it. You've got to respond if necessary. But for me, it gets back to the great people, great leaders, strong culture, great operating mechanisms. Doesn't need to be that hard.
If you're looking back at that young gentleman beginning his career, walking out of his home out of Miranda on the way into the city, or the branches, wherever he was going to be that day. After all these years and all this international experience, what advice would you give him now, Steve?
Um, in terms of personal attributes, connect, engage with people that take your brain to a place you wouldn't take it. Right? Don't read the same stuff every day. Read opposing viewpoints. What often happens, and this is one of the benefits of your job, what often happens when you are in an industry, you network with people all in your industry. One of the powerful things at GE is you work with people from all sorts of industries.
Yep.
Aviation, NBC Universal, power generation, oil and gas, financials. And your brain was continually being opened. And you saw aspects of these businesses, I can take that and apply it here. Yep. So it's what I encourage people to do today is, you need to meet once a week. You need to go have lunch with someone who's not in your industry, or go have a coffee and meet with them and just talk about things that apply to both companies, people, leadership. Now, in your world, you get to speak with all sorts of different people from different industries, and you get to see things that others can't. Mm-hmm. So have that open mind, and I think that's absolutely critical. 2, authenticity. Be real to people, connect, engage, treat the person at the door in the morning, or whether it's the Prime Minister, treat them with respect. And if anything, the folks at the front line work harder at connecting and engaging with them and understanding what's in their world. 3, learn how to be, and I'm not good at this, but learn how to be a great communicator. As you move up in an organisation, and it's more so today than any other point in history. When I went through high school, I was more a physics, math, chemistry guy, right? And my English, I'm really quite an introvert, and so I had no experience at all talking publicly. I actually struggled one-on-one. So I went and joined Toastmasters, as crazy as that sounds. And I did that for 10 years till I moved to New York. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but boy, what a great development exercise that was. And it got me up on my feet, being able to think, and it changed me a lot. Have a think about how to engage and influence people. Communication is the tool you use there. Think about deliberately, in a methodical way, what are the messages you want to convey? What actions do you want these people to do? How do you want them to feel? And then change your delivery style to get that. And that last bit is the most important. Is this last thing I often tell my kids is context is worth 100 IQ points. When people in your business understand why you're doing something, why, rather than here's what I need you to do, everybody's smarter. And what often happens in our world today, and this has been exacerbated since during the internet era, understanding, my little algorithm is understanding equals facts plus context. Unless you have both, you don't have understanding.
Yeah, right.
And what often happens, you might get facts, you rarely get context, right? Sometimes you don't even get facts. We had the opposition announce a nuclear policy with no facts, right? Which I just sit on the sidelines thinking, wow, it may be a good idea, but I have no way to assess what you're thinking. I need some context and I need some facts. And so that approach never makes any sense to me. I'm not smart enough to get my head around that stuff. But so I think if you can do that, you're gonna have a good, happy life. And I'd go into healthcare in a heartbeat. Love healthcare. There's an industry in transition, massive amount of technology. You can play in all sorts of different skill sets. You can care for people. You get up every morning feeling awesome about helping people. Even if you're making a device that cleans ultrasound probes, you can't help but feel great. At Nanosonics, we know we protect 30 million people a year from cross-contamination. I feel great about that. If Cochlear, you're helping people the ability to hear. You got to, so find a company or an industry that's got a really strong purpose. There's going to be volatility, but work through it.
Well, that's Steve. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Good to see you, mate.
Great chat.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Good to see you.
You've been listening to No Limitations.